Hey, what is up, mortals? It is Robo Celestial here with a new video for you. Welcome to the part 4 of What If Deku Got One for All Early Season 1. I just wanted to greet you guys by just saying, sit back and relax, you're in for a treat. So, we begin. Back in UA. The students of Class 1 were sitting in class. Today, you students will be going through rescue training. The location where this will happen will be in a different facility. Aizawa pressed a button on the handheld clicker and panels began sliding out of the wall with briefcases inside. So put your hero costumes on and meet outside by the buses in 10 minutes. But just remember you still aren't used to those costumes, so wear them at your own risk. The class got into their hero uniforms and started to all make their way down to this rescue facility. When they got there, they were approached by the rescue hero. 13. Welcome Class 1A. Today we will be going over some rescue training. In order to do that, we created a facility for just the thing. Welcome to the USJ. 13 opened the door to present the inside of the facility. Class 1A immediately got excited as they entered. The facility was filled with different hazard zones for all rescue situations. After 13 explained the basic gist of what they will be doing today in each hazard zone, a dark mist appears in the middle of the facility and villains started to emerge from it. Aizawa and All Might start to take a defensive stance. Get back. This isn't part of the training. Those villains are real. The students get close together behind the pro heroes before them. They were all dealing with this overwhelming sensation of fear since they're now seeing villains firsthand. 13 told Ida to run to the escape, and as in canon, he did, while 13 stopped Kurogiri from stopping it. Aizawa jumped right in and began taking on the villains in groups using his capture weapon for ranged combat. All Might was planning to reserve himself for the most part due to his very limited time limit. However, to be a hero you must have self-sacrifice. All Might leaped right in, breaking the sound barrier. The Namu that was next to Shigaraki leaped towards All Might as well. During this time, now that the students were alone with 13, Kurogiri covered them all in his black mist, teleporting them all to random hazard zones, all of them landing where they were in canon. Izuku fell into the massive body of water, where he was confronted by a shark villain, and he punched the water. This causes the water from his fist to shift around to a tremendous amount. The shark villain drifted backwards as Isui wrapped her tongue around Izuku's torso, leaping them both onto the yacht above. Izuku took a few coughs to recover his lungs with air. They then both, just like in canon, went to explain the situation and their quirks, ultimately coming up with a plan. Isui wrapped her tongue around Izuku once again and leaped, taking Izuku with her. Izuku then drew back his fist, punching at the water beneath him, causing them both to get launched. Izuku then began to keep them in the air by utilizing the pushback of the air with multiple times smaller punches, until they passed the water zone as whirlpools were summoned from the air pressure beneath them. When they landed, they both realized that Aizawa wasn't looking too hot, as he was overusing his quirk between the many members of the villains he was fighting. Eventually it got to a point where Aizawa was being overrun by all the villains and he was getting beaten to death. All Might was now in full-on battle with the Namu. However, just like Aizawa, it wasn't looking good. All Might was putting his all into fighting the Namu, eventually suplexing the Namu into the ground. However, Kurogiri used his teleport to teleport the Namu's upper body to arise from under All Might's torso, digging its fingers into his weak spot. This forced All Might to partially transform back to normal. Izuku had a worried look on his face as All Might was showing his true colors. The other students were watching in disbelief. Luckily, Todoroki already made short work of the group of villains he had to deal with and was there to freeze the Namu, loosening its grip on All Might for him to easily break free and back off to recollect himself. Izuku rushed towards All Might, keeping an eye on the villains. He was worried because there was clearly a lot of blood bleeding through All Might's shirt. "Will you be okay, All Might? What can I do to help? There isn't that much time left for you, is there?" All Might simply responded with a thumbs up as he buffed back up again. "Not to worry, young Midoriya. I will be fine. You should get back to the entrance with Aizawa. I'll deal with the villains here." All Might once again rushed back into the fight with the Namu, amping up his power immensely as each individual punch started to sound like shock waves now. Shigaraki was nervously scratching his neck looking at the scene, since Namu actually looked like it was taking quite a bit of damage now. Izuku, Todoroki, and 13 escorted Aizawa as well as the rest of the students back towards the entrance. Though out of worry for All Might, he looked back at the scene, only to see Bakugo walking out of the portal and stood behind the boss. Izuku's eyes widened to see that Bakugo is potentially with the villains now. The smaller teams of thugs began rushing at the young heroes. Izuku set his portion of Aizawa down, giving him to Todoroki as he ran back towards the scene. He cranked up his speed and began just rushing through all the villains while the air pressure from his fists were knocking them back out in groups with each punch. Bakugo leaped up in the air as he saw Izuku rushing towards Bakugo, and he dive-bombed straight towards him. Once he got close enough, he launched a full-powered explosion right at Izuku, only for him to leap in the air straight at the explosion, using a 50% kick to derail the trajectory of the blast off to the side as they both then clashed. As this went on, Shigaraki scratched his neck more. He began explaining the Namu's quirks to All Might to hopefully get him to feel discouraged in this fight. But All Might refused to back down. All Might then released his limiters, pushing One for All past 100% and punched the Namu in the torso, causing it to fly out of the stratosphere. All Might was letting off so much steam from his body, causing him to deflate as he was covered in a cloud of mist. Once the mist cleared, All Might was crouched onto the floor holding his weak spot bleeding through while coughing profusely with blood spewing out. He looked over at Izuku, only to see him struggling with his fight. Bakugo was throwing barrage after barrage of explosions right at Izuku. His skin along his arms began melting away as he was trying to block the blasts. Aizawa managed to open his eyes, looking at Bakugo, shutting off his quirk. This gave Izuku an opening, using One for All through his damaged arms and punching Bakugo back as he hit the wall. Izuku then collapsed, giving Shigaraki an opening to decay the kid. Immediately, as All Might noticed of Shigaraki's movements, he buffed up fully again, using the last bit of One for All to zip past Shigaraki and cover Izuku. He didn't have any more in him to keep fighting. He only had enough power for running at this point. Shigaraki made contact with All Might's skin, and then All Might picked up Izuku as he was slowly decaying, eventually making it back to the entrance after a few quick moments, falling to the floor with Izuku. It took a few moments, but Izuku opened his eyes to the sight of a smiling, decaying Small Might. He went and wrapped his arms around Izuku with tears flowing down his eyes. Izuku also began to cry as he saw the condition All Might was in. Young Midoriya, today ... you became my hero. I'm so grateful that you turned out to be my successor. Show the world what it means to be the symbol of peace. Just as All Might crumbled into dust in Izuku's arms as he was weeping with what was left of All Might, the villains once again began to regain consciousness. But it was too late. Ida has already returned with the rest of the pro heroes as backup. They began making their rounds, capturing as many villains as possible. This occurred while a wounded Shigaraki managed to escape even after taking a few bullets from the hero snipe. The pro heroes began to escort the class back into the buses, but Izuku refused to leave what was left of All Might behind. He pushed the heroes off of him as they were getting more forceful until Midnight used her quirk to put him to sleep. Bakugo's eyes widened as he witnessed All Might's death. As the pro heroes were making their rounds with the villains, Bakugo immediately ran to the portal, but he stopped just before going through, to take one final look at the remains of the former world's greatest hero, All Might. Thank you all for sticking around, and I hope that you enjoyed. Before you leave, we would just like to let you know that We the Celestials has many other channels for your entertainment and viewing purposes. All the information you'll need is right below here in the description, so feel free to check out all the other incredible projects our team creates. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. That's all for today's video. So goodbye and have a divine day.